What has been the most surprising and the most disappointing for the Buccaneers through the first 4 games? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
Your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Thursday episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Don't forget, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com at JYarcho_Bucs, joined by my long lost friend after many, many months of trying to get our schedules orchestrated. Finally, I am joined by Pewter Report's Bailey Adams. You can find him on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22. And of course, come follow the show 5 days a week. Bailey, first and foremost, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Bailey, I'm so happy to have you on the show. I was beginning to think you didn't like me anymore.
Well, the Bucs just beat the Saints, and I'm sitting here talking to you. How could I be any better? This is a great time to come and talk to you.
You could be better if the Rays had won on Wednesday.
I don't want to talk about it.
And they have not obviously played as we are recording this, but full disclosure, I needed the Rangers to win one of the first 2 games so that my dad could go to game 3 where he bought tickets. So hopefully, boom, they're going to rattle off 2 straight and the Rays will be moving on. I know all of our listeners and viewers will be really happy about that. But the Buccaneers have a lot of players that they need to pay and not a lot of money to spend. And of course, the biggest change that we should expect coming out of the bye week coming up in a little bit. But first, let's talk about surprises and disappointments. And something that David and I have talked about a lot on here is the Buccaneers being a surprise team to most, coming after the first 4 weeks when they were favorites to be in contention for the number 1 pick and Baker stinks and yada, yada, yada. Well, they're 3-1, first place in the NFC South. But Bailey, overall, taking a look at this Buccaneers team, what has been the most surprising thing to you?
I think when you come into the season with as many questions as you do, to see a lot of those questions answered, at least through 4 weeks, answered positively is a really big thing. Like Luke Goedeke has been one of the bigger surprises to me in terms of him coming in at right tackle. I know shorter than ideal arm length, and there was some questions about whether he could play right tackle at this level, but I think he's been, way better than he was at left guard last year, and he's been pretty solid. I'd say the second best offensive lineman on the team this year, behind Tristan Wirfs, of course. But he's been really good. And then the other 2 guys I'd point to are Christian Izien and Zion McCollum. Izien was an unknown guy out of Rutgers, undrafted. Todd Bowles saw him play when he went up to see his son play. I think at Rutgers was how the story went. And he picks in his first 2 games. He's been really good locking down that slot corner position. And then Zion McCollum having to step up and really, be a starter in the first few weeks because of the injuries to Davis and Dean. And he's been much improved. So I think that those 3 guys I'd look at as probably question marks coming into week 1 have been surprises and positive surprises so far through 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's hard to argue. I talked about Luke Goedeke quite a bit on the immediate reaction episode that I had following the Saints game, and just the video was circulating of one of Baker Mayfield's touchdown passes. I believe it was the one to Devin Tompkins, where Goedeke just absolutely stonewalled Cam Jordan. And for as much as Cam Jordan loves to run that mouth of his, to get stonewalled by a dude who was, outside of Donovan Smith, probably the biggest Buccaneer fan base punching bag on the team last season, it speaks a lot to probably how comfortable Luke Goedeke is going back to his natural position and just how much he has improved overall. But I had also mentioned that Zion McCollum was the Jameis Winston of corners, right? He'll make plays where your jaw drops and you just go, wow. And then he'll also make plays where your jaw drops and you just go, oh wow. So yeah, I've loved to see the improvement out of all those guys. I'm with you 100%. But let's flip the happy to the sad now and talk about what has been to you the most disappointing thing about this Buccaneers team through 4 weeks.
I've got a few things that I could get through here. I think if I'm to pick one, I'd probably say Robert Hainsey. I think he's been struggling mightily at the center position, in place of Ryan Jensen. And I thought last year he did an admirable job, and it was in tough position, tough situation for him to step into. Started all 17 games and wasn't stellar, but I thought he was, a pretty solid replacement level. And doing well. And I even coming into this year, I was like, all right, the Jensen news sucks. Everyone wanted to see Ryan Jensen back, but they've got Robert Hainsey, who's played 17 games there last year. And, he knows what he's doing now. And I think his play has dropped. And I don't know what that's been, whether that's been playing next to two new guards or if it's just been, something with him. But I think in the interior of that offensive line, he's probably been the weak link, even when you've got, Matt Filer, who was kind of an unknown, and then a rookie in Cody Mount.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you 100%. And I was in the same boat as you, right? We saw Robert Hainsey play all last year. I thought he did a pretty decent job. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was a top 10 center last year, but he was middle of the row. You weren't really complaining about him too much. And this year it seems like he's struggling a lot. And that has in turn led to some of the issues in the run game. Of course, Baker Mayfield has done a phenomenal job of evading sacks and getting out of trouble, but that run game has been so up and down. And a lot of that, you see the lanes not opening in the middle, you see pressure coming in through the middle, and a lot of that, it gets put on the shoulders of Robert Hainsey.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been the case. And I think if I were to pick anything else, it would probably be even the play of the tight ends, I think, has been not up to where everyone expected it to be. And I think it's almost unfair because of what did we really expect from Keeft and David Wells? In Payne Durham, I guess, it has not even seen the field. But even Kate Otten, I was thinking he would be, taking the next step. I was encouraged by him last year, and I thought that he would take the next step this year. And it's not that he's been awful, I wouldn't say, but he just hasn't been kind of what I thought he would be, in the passing game, but also as a blocker. And I think the group as a whole has not performed too well.
Yeah, again, it's hard to argue with you. And I'm a Kate Otten guy. All of our listeners and viewers know how much I love Kate Otten. And like you said, he's done okay. It's not like he's having egregious drops or things like that, but he's just not really a factor, right? He's not really a big part of the passing game. He's been kind of that dump off safety option a couple of times. And then of course, like you mentioned, nothing to write home about in the blocking uh in the blocking game for him. So yeah, I'm with you 100% on the disappointments. Of course, I'm obviously disappointed in the run game, but you know, David talked about that quite a bit on the last episode. You can go back and check that out. But there are a lot of Buccaneers that need to be paid. And it's really hard to do that when you don't have any money. So, who are the Buccaneers going to be able to pay with so many on a contract year, coming up on a contract year, and having a great start to the season? That is next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and they are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. With Prize Picks reboot policy, your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For NFL games and college football top 25 matchups, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs first listen review every single day. Every dayers, make sure you are coming back tomorrow, as I will be going live on YouTube at 7 p.m. to round out the bye week and look ahead to the Buccaneers' next matchup. So again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Turn on the notifications. You'll know when I go live. You'll join the every livers in the chat, like my buddy Daytona Dad and G Vegas. So Bailey, there have been some absolute studs for the Buccaneers this season, and a lot of them are looking to be paid sooner rather than later, and that leaves the Buccaneers in a tough position since they probably can't afford to keep them all. When you take a look at this list of players that I'm about to rattle off, how can you prioritize some over others? And we're talking about Antoine Winfield Jr., Mike Evans, Devin White, Baker Mayfield, Tristan Wirfs, he's coming up on a contract year. Chris Godwin, he's got one season left after this year. Carlton Davis, he's got one season left after this year. Shaq Barrett, same thing. So you take a look at all these guys that have to be paid in the next 2 years. How are you going to be able to justify who stays and who goes, especially when it comes to a guy like Mike Evans, who very clearly wants to get paid and wants to stay in Tampa, but seems like things are a little shaky there?
Yeah, I'm looking at a mixture of age and performance level. So I think the priority, first of all, would be Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. I think those are the priorities, and when the time comes, they will be the ones to get their paychecks and their big paydays, because this is they're still on their rookie contracts. They're due for their first big paydays. And then, and I don't know if it's a sentimental thing, but I think third on that list for me would be Mike Evans, because the performance level is still there. The age might be getting up there and coming down to the last few years of his career, but he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, save for a hamstring injury, but he's always dealt with a hamstring injury. So I'm not too concerned about that from week 4. So I would, it's one of those things where Winfield and Wirfs, I think they get their money. As far as Mike Evans and probably Devin White, it has to be like the money has to be right. And I'm not so sure that the money will be right for Devin White. Didn't mean to rhyme there. But to have that, but I think they could end up striking something with Mike Evans. I guess it's not going to be in the season. It's going to be in that window between the end of the season and free agency. But I'm looking at that kind of those 4. And then I think it's difficult because of the situation they're in with the cap. But some of those guys that are coming up on their last year's next year, like Shaq, like Chris Godwin, like Carlton Davis, I'm just kind of honestly putting those off. And then and Baker Mayfield, I'd say Baker Mayfield more for me is a wait and see. I mean, we're four weeks in. I'm not ready to pay him yet. So, and especially with the draft class that's coming in next year with the quarterbacks, I'm waiting on that. But that's kind of how I'm viewing it right now. And I know there's a long way to go and different things will happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, I can understand I guess for lack of a better term, the hesitation on Baker. You're right. It's only been 4 weeks, but he has certainly outperformed a lot of quarterbacks that are getting far more money than him. So he's going to get paid by somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not it's the Buccaneers, we do have to wait and see. You mentioned the upcoming quarterback draft class. Yeah, it absolutely is fantastic. But the Buccaneers so far are outperforming the ability to draft one of those guys, especially if they end up winning the division, making the playoffs. Even if they get bounced in the first round, you're looking at the 18th, 19th, 20th pick, somewhere in there. Taking a look at Antoine Winfield Jr., there's no question, and David and I talked about it on the last episode, that he is one of arguably, if not the best safety in the NFL right now. And you take a look at some of the money that these safeties have been getting. You got Derwin James at the top of the list, of course, at $42 million guaranteed. You got Minka with $36 million guaranteed. Jamal Adams, $38 guaranteed. Jesse Bates just got a big fat paycheck with $36 guaranteed from the Atlanta Falcons. Antoine's younger than all these guys. Jamal Adams is 28. Jesse Bates is 26. Derwin and Minka are both 27. So he's going to get a huge, huge amount of money given what he is producing, how he is utilized in Todd Bowles' defense. And I think that's where we run into an issue now of, as you put it, that sentimental choice of Mike Evans, who is still producing. He's been one of the best receivers in the NFL through the first month of the season. But, you know, something that I've said for a really long time is the Bucs are going to have to choose. They have to make a choice between keeping Antoine Winfield Jr. and keeping Devin White. One of those two guys is not going to be in a Buccaneers uniform next season. If you're faced with that decision, Bailey, and you have to pick between Antoine and Devin, you know, who do you go with, and how do you justify seeing the other guy walk out the door?
It's extremely difficult because I think you want the easy answer to just be Antoine Winfield Jr. I think just because of the way this past offseason unfolded, and there was some kind of just some, I don't know if ill will is the right word, but just some kind of friction there with Devin White. But Devin White has played well so far this year, and he's definitely flashed that upside in the past. And I think the way you would justify seeing him walk away is if for the rest of this season, if he's still kind of that inconsistent player and not, consistently making plays and kind of being out of position, then you're like, okay, we love what we have here, but we just can't justify making that payment. The thing that also kind of throws a wrinkle into it is the linebacker situation in general, because Levante David's getting up there in age and he's on a 1-year deal. So we don't know if he's back next year. And so suddenly, if he's retiring and he's not back next year, and then you're letting Devin White walk, you're having to replace 2 starting linebackers. And that's a difficult thing to do. And I think they like what they have in Servassier Dennis, a 5th-round pick, but he has not been able to stay healthy so far. So haven't been able to see much of him. And, love to see him develop and take care of one of those spots, but you just don't know right now. So I'd still lean Winfield, but it's extremely difficult to kind of justify, given the linebacker situation, letting Devin White just walk out the door.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Last thing before we move on a scale of, I guess we'll just say a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the most heartbroken a human being could possibly be, and 1 being, okay, who cares? Mike Evans leaves. How are you gonna feel? And how do you think Bucks fans are gonna feel if they don't bring him back?
I'm gonna feel I'm gonna feel probably an 8 or a 9, and I think Bucks fans will probably feel somewhere from 8 to 10. I understand it's a business, and when you look at the money side of it, it is difficult, especially with his age and what he's asking for reportedly. But it's just what he's done. He's been the best offensive player in franchise history. He's got all the records. I was at the draft party at Raymond James when they drafted him. I was in high school. Remember that day vividly, and he's become the best draft pick, the best offensive player that Jason Light has ever made, and one of the best in Bucs history. So, and what he's meant to the community as well. Like, it's just, there's so many levels of what Mike Evans means to the Bucs and their fans, and it would be very difficult to see him in a different uniform.
Bailey just made me feel super old talking about being in high school at the Mike Evans
That's
draft.
what I always do.
Wow.
I always have to.
All right. Well, we are going to talk about what needs to change coming out of the bye week for the Buccaneers to continue to find success on the football field. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were far and away the longest odds to win the NFC South, and through 4 weeks, they are sitting at 3-1 and clearly have the best quarterback in the division, but they still haven't done enough to convince FanDuel, who still has Tampa Bay with the second best odds to win the NFC South at plus 185, trailing the New Orleans Saints, who they just smacked around up and down a football field, which means you can take advantage of FanDuel's clear Saints bias and make $185 off of a $100 bet if the Buccaneers prove me, David, Bailey, and all of you right by winning the NFC South Division crown without Tom Brady. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you don't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. This episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by BetterHelp. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? For example, I'm the kind of person that has to fall asleep with the TV on because if I don't, my mind starts to wander off to places I'd rather not go. And talking to someone about the problems that my brain tries to create can help me get to the root of the real problems and calm me down. If you're thinking of getting started with therapy, then you need to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists for any reason at any time for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today and get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Wrapping things up here on a reunion Thursday episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast. James Yarcho joined by Pewter Report's Bailey Adams, who just made me feel super duper old in the last segment, but that's okay. You take a look at what the Buccaneers have been able to accomplish. And it's been rather impressive when you consider the expectations coming into the season, but things are far from perfect. So, what is the biggest change that you expect to see coming out of the bye week?
I don't know specifically what it is, but something with the run game. I think kind of the way they deploy the running backs, and I think they're trying to figure that out right now because Rachaad White's obviously been the number one guy, but they've been mixing in Sean Tucker, who hasn't had the greatest results so far. And then we saw against the Saints, Keyshawn Vaughn getting some carries. So neither guy really wowing, and even Rachaad White has been inconsistent. I think it was almost a little weird to see. I don't remember the exact numbers, but Rachaad White had maybe around 15 carries, and Vaughn wasn't far behind him against the Saints. So I don't know if they kind of approach it like Rachaad White's going to be a 20 to 25 carry guy, or if they're just going to have to figure out and establish a rhythm with their backups. But they've got to do something to kind of get this run game going more consistently, because I know part of it is the running backs, part of it's the offensive line. But I think on the whole, you'll look at the running backs and say that they can be a lot better.
Yeah, it's been frustrating, and it's been nice on those even numbered weeks where we've seen the run game be somewhat effective and productive. And it's something that I've talked about on here numerous times, that continuously sticking with it. Dave Canales saying that he's going to be stubborn about it. It will pay dividends, and we saw that in the Saints game late, into the late third, into the fourth quarter, where Rachaad White started breaking off some of those chunk runs and helping the Bucs move the chains a little bit. So it's definitely frustrating. Some of it can be attributed to the lack of explosiveness, the lack of decisiveness out of these running backs. Rachaad White has missed plenty of open lanes by dancing around, doing a little, who was it? Was it Charles Sims that used to just dance all over the place instead of hitting the running lane and gaining some yards? But as you brought up in that opening segment, a lot of this can be attributed to the offensive line and the struggles of Robert Hainsey, along with Cody Mauch, who's, he's got his rookie growing pains, right? He's not going to be perfect and great right from the jump, but he has played, I believe, as you put it, admirably for the most part. So yeah, the run game certainly needs to be figured out. I don't think this is a situation where they go out and they bring in someone off the street, or they make a trade or anything like that, for a multitude of reasons, whether it's financial or just the fact that if you bring in another running back, you're not getting Jonathan Taylor, right? So is anyone that you bring in going to be better than what the Buccaneers already have at this point in time? And then you're looking at what you're going to bring Leonard Fournette back. That's not happening.
No, certainly isn't. I don't think that's in the cards. And it's true. I don't know if there's really anybody out there on the street. If there's somebody better, it's kind of why are they out there on the street anyway? Like, I don't think you're going to just suddenly find a fix off the street and off the free agent market 5 weeks into the season. But I think there's something to be done with the running backs. And I think at this point, it kind of unfortunately feels like there's not really any explosiveness here. I mean, Sean Tucker might have the most explosiveness and the best speed in the running back room, but I think you're kind of going to patch things together throughout the rest of the season, and then hope that next offseason you can kind of find that guy in the draft who's going to really be your running back. And I'm not happy to give up on Rachaad White just yet, but I just don't know that he's going to be the number one guy who is going to be continuing to be a 20 and 25 carry guy. I'm not sure that we've seen enough there yet to really believe that's going to be coming.
Yeah, hard to argue with you there. Now, Bailey, I'm going to ask you for a favor. I need your help to make what I want to see happen come out of the bye week a reality, because I do feel that this is one of the dumbest and most ridiculous things I've seen in quite a while. And whether it's you personally or you can pass this message along to Scott and he can relay the message, but can Todd Bowles get off this stupidity of not putting captain's patches on players' jerseys? Like, what is this? Come on.
I didn't understand it from the jump, and I'm especially still confused that they haven't done it yet. I know it was like, oh, leaders are going to separate themselves, and it felt like an excuse to kind of just wait and see and let Devin White take over that, like that leadership role that everyone knew he was going to have anyway. So if you knew that was coming, just put the C on his chest. I know people might have been upset at first, but no one's really going to care, I don't think. I think throughout the summer, it was like, yeah, he shouldn't be a captain next year. Now it's just like, all right, that's in the past. Who cares? Let's get the captains out there. They've been the same captains every week, it seems like. So what's the point? I don't know. I don't know when that's coming either. I mean, I may be out of the bye week, but if it's not out of the bye week, are they just going to go all year with no captains?
I don't know. It's stupid and ridiculous. This is real easy. Todd, I'm going to fix this for you right now. Baker, Tristan, Evans, Devin, Levante, Antoine. And then on special teams, I don't know, Chase McLaughlin, because he's from Illinois. Like that's it. We're done. You want to throw a bonus one in there? It's hard for me to pick Vita Vea over Levante David, but I could also see it. Like Levante's always been a captain. So just have 4 captains on defense. Who cares? There's like no hard limit. So yeah, 3 on offense, 4 on defense, Chase McLaughlin because he's an Illini, and let's just keep it moving.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't want to argue the McLaughlin thing because he is from Illinois, but I think Jake Camarda has a case for himself too. So that would be my only argument there.
Camarda is absolutely the correct pick, but I'm gonna say Chase McLaughlin because Illinois.
Got to stick up for your guys. You got to.
That's right. I mean, and how often is there a good Illinois player from or on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that I can talk about? I was real excited about Aurelius Ben. That didn't go well, but he was super good in college. The old bend around. How much do we miss that?
A ton.
Was that the Schiano years? I can't remember now.
I guess it would have been around the Raheem or Schiano years, right? Early 2010s.
Yeah, because it was Aurelius Ben and Mike Williams and Josh Freeman. So yeah, we're looking at 2011, 2012, somewhere in there.
What year was Antonio Bryant a big deal?
That was the end of the Gruden era. That was
08, 09. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, good times. All right, Bailey, let everybody know what you have going on over at Pewter Report, and let our UCF fan listeners know where they can catch some of your UCF content.
Yeah, so over at Pewter Report throughout the week and weekend, I just wrote a story on Tristan Wirfs and his continued dominance now that he's moved over to left tackle and how well that transition is going. That went up on the site on Wednesday. And then throughout this weekend, we'll have I'll have the most disappointing and the most impressive players throughout the first 4 weeks for the Bucs. And then my UCF podcast, the Pegasus podcast, is anywhere you find your podcast. If you want to listen to us talk about UCF, or you really just want to listen to us complain about UCF at this point after they blew, was it a 35-7 lead over the weekend and gave up 29 fourth quarter points. We've had some cathartic podcasts in the last week or so. So if you want to catch those, and whether you're a UCF fan or you just want to listen to people, deal with painful things, if you're a sicko, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts.
That is Atlanta Falcons level of implosion.
Yeah.
I saw on Twitter that it was either Twitter, it might have been Facebook, I can't remember now, that you were upset at what happened with the UCF game, but I did not go any further than that. I did not know the context of which you were so upset. My apologies. makes you feel any better, my son being the Notre Dame fan that he is, having to deal with all the Ohio State fans at school following that game. That was rough. But yeah, make sure you are checking out everything that Bailey is doing over at Pewter Report, and follow him on Twitter at Bailey J. Adams 22. Always love seeing your record watch go up. That was always one of my favorite things when we worked together over at Bucs Nation. Glad to see that is continuing. But that is going to do it for this episode. Again, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Come and join me Friday at 7 p.m. live on YouTube to round out this bye week and look ahead to Creamsicle Week. Yeah, I need to figure out how to incorporate Creamsicle. Locked On Podcast Network people, I need Creamsicle graphics for all of next week. Please and thank you. Check out everything that I'm doing over at BucsNation.com and follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs and at JYarcho_Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. But thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.